We've all had that moment of regret when we finish building a new computer or we get a new phone or a new car, and then after like a week of bliss, the company announces a new one is coming out that's way better than the one you just bought. Come on! Well, that moment just happened to us here at LTT. We had hardly finished building our LAN center before AMD dropped a bomb on the industry with their Zen 2, AKA Ryzen 3rd Gen processors. So we are taking that bomb and dropping it into one of our LAN rigs to see how it handles. And this is where we drop our segue. Today's video is brought to you by Storyblocks Video. They offer you studio quality stock video clips for a fraction of the cost. So check it out today at the link in the video description. Now, it's impossible to predict the future. That's tech tip number 1. So when we received the new CPUs from AMD after just building the new LAN center, we all had a good laugh. The sad kind. But exactly how screwed are we by this? And if you're in a similar situation, exactly how SOL are you? Well, it depends. Does the store you bought it from have a return policy? You may be able to return the product for a refund and get the shiny new part right away. But if you're outside the return window, what are your other options? In our case, we don't need to worry about a whole platform change, since Ryzen 2 and 3 both use the AM4 platform. You might be able to give your motherboard a BIOS update, drop in your new chip, and enjoy the greater performance. And we'll get to exactly how to do that in a bit. But what if you just bought an Intel CPU and motherboard? Then you panic. Just kidding, you've got a few options. A lot of computer components, especially newer stuff, can retain a decent percentage of their value for longer. So you can just sell the CPU and board and keep the rest of your hardware as it is still viable for the new build. Now, the used market can be a bit fickle, but if you kept the boxes, packaging, and receipt, there's a good chance you'll be able to recoup between 60 to 75% of what you paid, and sometimes more, depending on timing or what area you reside in. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. Another thing you can do is use the parts you just replaced and build a rig for a friend. They'd get a discount and they'd owe you one. A favor you could redeem at the time of your choosing. But back to AMD. Team Red's commitment to supporting the AM4 socket through 2020 has given us an interesting set of components that are all interchangeable. We now have 3 generations of CPU that are compatible across 6 chipsets, with a couple of exceptions. 1st gen Ryzen chips are not compatible with the X570 chipset, and 3rd gen Ryzen won't work on A320 boards. While AMD has given us a neat little compatibility chart for their desktop chips, Intel has taken it a step further for their processors with a very useful website dedicated to checking compatibility for older processors all the way back to the Core 2 quads. Those geezers. All that to say, basically, if you've got an AM4 motherboard, chances are you can simply update your BIOS and drop your new Ryzen processor in for an easy bump in performance. If you've never updated your BIOS before, it's pretty easy. Head to your board manufacturer's website, go to the support section, and search for your board's model number. Once you find it, look for the latest BIOS update. Usually they're sorted by newest first, then download the installer and run it. This should be a relatively simple process, but keep in mind if the power goes out during a BIOS update, your computer could be bricked. So ideally, use a UPS, or definitely don't do this during a thunderstorm. Why would you be doing that? Now, after your BIOS is updated, pull off your cooler and remove your old CPU, then install your new shiny one. Put it all back together, boot it back up, and pray to the PC gods it all works. Hot tip, I've heard they're more likely to listen if you buy our merch at lttstore.com. Now, I hear some of you asking, but Riley, am I losing out on performance by not also upgrading my motherboard? I heard some of you say that just now. The meds are starting to wear off. Well, with Ryzen, probably not. The only major feature added on X570 is PCIe 4.0 support, which right now only provides a bump in performance for NVMe SSDs as they can use the increased throughput. Now, for those of you saying, but X470 can handle PCIe 4.0. Well, AMD is turning off that functionality in their next AGESA update. We will have to wait and see what board manufacturers do in response. But for everyone else, you probably won't notice any difference in gaming. Now we should say, buying a 3rd gen Ryzen chip with an X570 board is technically the recommended configuration. We suggest the 3700X because of its all-around fantastic performance and great pricing. But if you have limited funds, we recommend getting the best 3rd gen Ryzen CPU you can afford and keeping your existing AM4 motherboard, unless it's an A320. Motherboards can give you an extra 1 to 3 FPS, depending, but realistically, the CPU is the best value in this scenario, and we recommend the board being the last upgrade if your current one is compatible. So, AMD has claimed that they have one of the most consumer-friendly series of CPUs and chipsets in the history of the x86 platform. But now that we can see almost the entire upgrade cycle, how did they do? Well, if you bought an X370 board and a 1700X on release in 2017, you would have been able to enjoy top-tier performance for a year. And if you just hated the feeling of running last-gen hardware, you could flip the 1700X for about 75% the original price when the 2700X arrived. Another year of bliss, and then another flip when the 3700X came on sale. Your parents never said no, huh? In total, you would have spent just over $500 and got to enjoy 3 generations of CPUs from AMD. That's pretty compelling if you fancy yourself an enthusiast. Plus, you didn't have to upgrade your motherboard. Compare that to Intel at about $680 doing the same thing, and that's not including the motherboard upgrade. Basically, you have a fantastic amount of choice and can hit whatever price to performance threshold you desire with AMD's approach. Now, maintaining that level of compatibility does have its downsides. You can end up with a CPU that supports PCIe 4.0 and a board that doesn't have any 4.0 slots, and if you have an A320 board, well, you're out of luck if you want to upgrade to Zen 2. While there is a lot going for AMD here, compromises had to be made to maintain stability and the user experience. That's just life, you know? Which brings us back to the LAN cave. Just kidding, we've been here the whole time. Are we upgrading to Ryzen 3? Although it would be quite simple to upgrade these rigs, there are 12 of them. And honestly, they're already delivering excellent performance, so it doesn't really seem necessary. But at least with AMD, we've got the option. Speaking of which, video creators have tons of options for stock footage if they use our sponsor, Storyblocks Video. You can get studio quality stock video clips for a fraction of the cost with Storyblocks Video. Download all the stock video your heart desires from their member library, including HD and 4K footage, After Effects templates, motion backgrounds, and more. We use it quite a bit here on Linus Tech Tips, so you might have seen it already and not even noticed. All their content is royalty-free, so you can use it for commercial and personal projects, such as YouTube videos, like this one. New clips are added regularly, so there's always something fresh to download, so check it out today at the link below, and to learn more. Whoa, that was the video already? Wow! See you later.